So I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the James City County Planning Commission. It's February 2nd, 2022, and it's 6 o'clock. Mr. Holt, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District. Mr. Kropp, who represents the Powhatan District, could not be with us this evening. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is vice chair to the commission. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member and is chair of the Planning Commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county. And sitting to my left is Max Slavin, our Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
Thank you.
Just a quick housekeeping note. First and foremost, Mr. Haldeman, welcome back. So a short hiatus, but we're glad to have you back.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for agreeing to re-up for it. So we'll get you back in this chair in a couple of months. So, just one thing we would like to do is take from our Planning Commission discussion and requests. We're going to have an update on the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan effort, and we would like to amend the agenda to move that up to follow in after the consent agenda. We have the consultant available remotely, and so we'd like to have her make her presentation early and then let her go. So can I get a motion to amend? So we have a motion to amend. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you. And to start tonight, I would like to, we wished a fair farewell to Julia Leverenz last month, but because of health reasons and the like, she wasn't able to join us. So I would like to take a moment and offer some appreciation to Ms. Leverenz. So Julia, if you'll join me up front. Thank you for being here tonight. So we have a resolution of appreciation for Ms. Julia Leverenz. Whereas Ms. Leverenz has served the citizens of James City County as a member of its Planning Commission from February 2018 to January 2022. And whereas Ms. Leverenz served as vice chair of the 2020 Planning Commission. And whereas Ms. Leverenz served on both the Policy Committee and the Development Review Committee during her tenure. And whereas Ms. Leverenz served as chairman of the 2019 Policy Committee, and Ms. Leverenz actively participated in developing our county, our shared future, James City County 2045 Comprehensive Plan by serving on both the Community Participation Team and Planning Commission Working Group for the Engage 2045 update process. And whereas Ms. Leverenz actively participated in developing the 2015 Comprehensive Plan toward 2035, leading the way by serving on the steering committee. And during Ms. Leverenz's service, the Planning Commission reviewed substantive updates to the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance and considered numerous legislative development cases. And whereas Ms. Leverenz was a graduate of the Virginia Tech Certified Planning Commissioner Program, now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission of James City County, Virginia, does hereby extend its sincere appreciation to Ms. Julia Leverenz. And be it further resolved that the Planning Commission wishes to express its gratitude to Ms. Leverenz for her time of dedicated service to the citizens of James City County. So, Julia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, you get the pretty copies.
Okay.
So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I would like to add that Julia has spent the past number of years being our grammatician. So she has wordsmithed us to keep us honest and on point. So
Ms. Language person.
I know. So we are going to miss that, but we appreciate all your efforts and all your input and wish you much success. And we look forward to your other contributions to the county.
Thank you. Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay. We've been busy these last few years. I want to thank each and every one of you. I have learned something from every single one of you, and it's been a steep learning curve. I'm sure those of you who are new to the commission have found that to be true. But one of the things that really impresses me about this commission and the people who serve on it is how even when we disagree, we're really nice to each other. And that is increasingly uncommon in this day and age. So I just want to commend you all for that. And Mr. Holt, you and your staff make up a powerhouse of expertise and professionalism, and I just want to make sure that you understand that. When I first attended that Virginia Tech program, introduced myself as being a new planning commissioner from James City County, the instructor said, "Oh, wow, lucky you." Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda tonight is public comment. This is the time of the agenda reserved for items that are not subject to public hearing this evening. So is there anybody that wishes to address the commission on anything other than a public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to reports of the commission. Mr. Polster, Policy Committee?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Ms. Null, Development Review Committee?
Development Review Committee met on January 19th, 2022. Commissioners present were Barbara Null, Frank Polster, and Rob Rose. Staff in attendance were Josh Crump, Principal Planner, Thomas Weissong, Senior Planner, John Reisinger, Planner, Susie Yeats, Planner, and Katie Pelletier, Community Development Assistant. There was one case for the DRC consideration, number C 21-0099, Stonehouse Tract 10A, Conceptual Plan. Mr. Jeff Huntelman, Land Planning Solutions, LC, has submitted a conceptual plan for new construction of 200 residential units consisting of 80 single-family homes, 18 units that are attached residences with 2 to 4 units, 54 units that are attached residences with more than 4 units and fewer than 3 stories, and 48 units that are attached residences with more than 4 units and are 3 stories or more. This case came before the DRC because proffer number 10, approved by the Board of Supervisors on November 12th, 2019, with case number Z 190010, requires a conceptual plan to be submitted to the Planning Director and the DRC for review at least 60 days prior to submittal of a development plan for the tract. The purpose of this review is to determine general consistency with zoning ordinance requirements, the adopted master plan, and other applicable county policies. Mr. Weissong stated that staff had reviewed and analyzed the conceptual plan accordingly, and the staff found that the conceptual plan complies with the approved master plan for Stonehouse. The conceptual layout complies with the zoning requirements for a planned unit development, residential. The majority of the applicable proffers and other applicable county policies, the number of units complies with the unit caps proffered for Stonehouse development, and the conceptual plan complies with the approved proffers applicable to Tract 10A. Mr. Weissong said staff found no unfavorable factors in the review and recommends that the DRC find the conceptual plan to be generally consistent with the zoning ordinance, adopted master plan, adopted proffers, and other applicable county policies. Dr. Rose inquired about the revision to provide a 3-story option. Ms. Melissa Venable, Land Planning Solutions, said the 3-story option would have a 2-car garage on the ground floor with 2 floors of living space above it. She said they hope to have that flexibility for small footprint single-family homes. Mr. Polster said that while he finds this application conforming, he does have concerns about the impact and timing of multiple Stonehouse tract applications and whether any proffers would be triggered. Mr. Weissong said that staff can provide information on the unit counts that will trigger any proffers. However, it is unknown which tract development plan will come in first. He said the unit counts trigger the proffers only when the plans are approved. Mr. Tim Culpepper, Robinson Development Group, said they are aware of the needs of improvements based on the continued development of Stonehouse, hopefully simplified by now, having only one group moving forward for implementation. That outside Land Bay 5, their company will be responsible for all development of all remaining units at Stonehouse and for compliance with associated Stonehouse proffers. He said that they know the proffers are based on unit counts, and as they submit civil design plans for review, they will comply with the report and study requirements and proffered obligations. The DRC found the conceptual plan to be generally consistent with the zoning ordinance, adopted master plan, adopted proffers, and other applicable county policies by a vote of 3-0. Meeting was adjourned at 4:30. Respectfully submitted, Barbara Knoll.
Thank you, Ms. Knoll. Any questions?
Not a question, but a comment. When Barb was talking about the triggering piece, Tom Weissong had an update to us.
Right.
And so when you look at all of the conceptual plans, the 4 of them, which totals about 951 new residential units, it ends up that the Land Bay 5, which was the first one, is triggering a warrant for a stoplight at the Fieldstone and 30. And so I think it gets to the issue that we were talking about on the the Hazelwood piece in terms of both of those looking at what all of the traffic implications are that would slow it down, as well as it would be in place before they did the development thing. So I think that was an interesting piece for us to see.
Right, right. So the 2 lights will go in, and Stonehouse will pay for them before the first unit
That's
development
right.
comes up. That's
It looks like it could be the west off ramp off of 64, also maybe the second one for it, but yet we'll see on that one. Anyhow, that was it.
Thank you very much. On our consent agenda tonight, we have minutes of the January 5th, 2022 regular meeting and the Development Review Committee action item C-21-0099 Stonehouse Tract 10A. Can I get a motion to approve, or if anybody'd like to remove one, we could?
to approve.
There's a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Mr.
opposed?
Chairman, I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alderman. So, sorry, we have 4 ayes and 1 abstention of Mr. Haldeman. So, motion carries. Thank you. I would also like to note, before we get into the next item, Mr. Haldeman has agreed to serve on both the DRC and the Policy Committee for the next 2 months. So, just in time for the CIP, Jack, so thank you very much.
Miss it.
And now we have item I, which we've moved up, update on the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan effort. And I believe Ms. Rosario is on the phone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. Over the past several months, staff, the Natural and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee, and the Technical Advisory Committee have worked with our consultant team on the first steps of developing the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan. Ms. Karen Firehawk, Executive Director of GIC, will make a brief presentation on progress to date and next steps. We look forward to any questions and input from the Commission to incorporate into the process. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Firehawk.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rosario and members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, albeit virtually. Thank you for letting me present in this manner. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hopefully get some confirm that you can see it. Can I get it looks like the control room is showing it as visible, so I'll go right ahead.
We have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So I made this presentation to the Board of Supervisors last week, and they said, oh, the Planning Commission would also like to see this, so let's make sure that they do. And before I begin, I'll just give a shout out to all of you commissioners. I myself have been a planning commissioner for actually 16 years, so I love Planning Commission. So with that, let me begin. I'm going to talk tonight about the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan for James City County. And this is an in-progress update. So this project has already begun last fall. And so I'm just going to give you a quick reminder tonight of the project origin, especially for members of the public who may be listening in, progress to date and draft maps, and then next steps for expanded community engagement. So just a quick reminder of the impetus for the project. This project began as part of the 2035 strategic plan and was an outgrowth of affirmed community priorities established during the recent update. And one of the things that the plan called for was a natural and cultural assets plan. So you had an environmental goal to improve the high level environmental quality in James City County and protect rural and sensitive lands and waterways to support your resiliency. And then you have strategy 3, protect and conserve environmentally sensitive areas, and work to maintain and promote the ecosystem services they provide. And then finally, Environmental Action 3.1, which specifically called for the plan that we're working on. So with that, just quickly, what are natural and cultural assets and why do we need to evaluate them? Well, they are all of the natural resources that contribute to our ecology, our economy, and our culture. And one of the things we need to consider is where they are located and what is their condition. So just like you know about the assets that might include your school buildings or your wastewater treatment plant or your road network, those are all assets that you take care of. Nature is also part of our assets, and we have to understand its condition and also understand its importance. So here's some examples of some of the environmental resources of James City County. And all of the photographs I'll be showing you tonight are from the county, of course, including this barred owl that I found in a local park calling back and forth to other owls. So there are a lot of different creatures depending on you, whether you can see them or not. And I'm going to talk tonight about some of the benefits quickly, just preserving biodiversity and wildlife habitat. So mapping and conserving these large intact landscapes, but also working lands such as farms and forests that contribute to the economy. So agricultural soils are part of natural assets as well. Protecting and preserving water quality and supply. Whether you're getting your water from a reservoir or from a groundwater well that your family depends on. Providing cost-effective stormwater management and hazard mitigation. So protecting these areas will also make it more resilient to storms. And then improving public health, quality of life, and recreation network. And that's probably the one we can most all relate to, especially during this time of COVID, where people are really looking for ways to get outside and recreate and gather. These natural assets also support cultural assets. So if you think about the settings around plantation houses or battlefields, James City County, of course, being the birthplace of our nation, really has a wealth of culture, and even culture going back pre-colonial, such as Native American sites and artifacts. But you think about how the landscape supports this experience, whether you're going to visit a battlefield site or whether you're going to a plantation or whether you're just going to a park. The natural resources also support that experience and protect these resources. So as part of this effort, we're also mapping sort of these cultural assets and looking at how the landscape supports them. And there's a lot of applications for planning from this work. So for example, transportation plans, that's an obvious one. Just looking at where future roads might be located, whether you might decide to shift a road slightly left or right to try to make way for habitat, or perhaps getting involved with wildlife tunnels or other ways to help make roads safer for everyone. Comprehensive plans or zoning decisions, you might look at that in the future as you look at these landscapes. Conservation easements, if you're a land trust, you might be looking at what are the most important landscapes to protect. Whether you're planning a future park, if you're identifying lands for purchase of development rights. Heritage tourism, of course, is a huge deal in James City County. And so thinking about how this landscape can also even better support those experiences. Ag and forestal districts, where might new ones be located or how might districts expand? And then just general land management, which might be individual decisions by a landowner. For example, already in this project, a landowner had come forth working on a development plan and wanted to know if they could use some of this data to figure out where should they put the buildings on their site, where should they try to look for areas to conserve. So it has practical everyday applications. And so what we've done is we've mapped the largest and most intact landscapes in James City County. And what we're looking for are what we call interior habitats. By interior, I mean that the area is large enough and deep enough that species can live and forage for food, find mates, thrive and succeed, and there's enough landscape for them to be successful. So for example, in Virginia, the sort of math of this is we look for at least 100 acres of intact landscape. And that supports a lot of our deep forest interior birds like the cerulean warbler or scarlet tanager. But these habitats might be a forest, they might be a large wetland or marsh system. So it's anything that's a native land cover that's large enough to support a native species. And then we also look for how they connect, because we want to have corridors across the landscape so species can move. And it's interesting to think about this. It's not just animals and birds that are moving across the landscape, but we are as well. So as we provide more corridors, there's more options potentially for the future for trail networks, et cetera. Now, some of these landscapes we found on private lands, and just want to be clear, we're not suggesting opening up landscapes to the public, but we are just letting people know that you may have an important resource on your property, and that may affect decisions that you make on, for example, where you put your house, or your conservation plan, et cetera. So there's a 6-step process that we take the community through. And step 1, set your goals. What do you value? We've kind of got a lot of that work done because you already identified a lot of this in the 2035 strategic plan. So we have a lot of community input on things that are important to James City Countyans. And then review data. So we spent the fall and some of the summer looking at what data we have available, and then also to create new data. So this is where we're at now. Step 3, creating the maps. And we're mapping both those cultural resources I talked about, as well as cultural assets. So we're looking at what's important to the county and then bringing those forward onto maps, because we need to know where they are, how extensive they are, and what condition are they in. In future phases, we'll be looking at what's at risk. So what might go away if no action is taken? And that doesn't mean that there will be no development or no loss of some of those landscapes over time, but we want to know what's going to change in the future. And changes could be from any number of sources. Then we'll look at what's important to you guys, what's important to James City County. So is there a specific conservation plan you want to get involved with, or a zoning decision, or is it just letting landowners know how they can take care of their land? And then opportunities. So I can't tell you tonight what those opportunities will be because we haven't gotten to this stage. We're really just in the phase right now of capturing what's important, and then we'll be moving into what to do. So here's the progress to date and just sort of a basic flow chart showing where we're at with the months. GIC stands for my firm, JCC, James City County. The TAC is the Technical Advisory Committee that's made up of county staff that help to preview our work and make sure that we're on the right track. And then SC is my sort of abbreviation for the steering committee, which is the National and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee. It's a mouthful. And they were appointed by the Board of Supervisors to make sure that we have a good representation of views across the community. The Board of Supervisors will also be reviewing the work in addition to yourselves this evening. And then we have other opportunities for community engagement. So we've had a couple of our mapping committee meetings, and now we're working on incorporating their comments into the maps that we built. And then we're going to be moving forward into a community engagement phase. So our plan is to launch some online maps. We thought February 14th would be fun, Valentine's Day, like what do you heart about James City County? And so we'll let people put pins on these maps online. And then we'll also have some stations available at the library and the rec center for folks that, wouldn't necessarily go online and use a computer to do this, as well as, just capturing people who are going out to visit the rec center or taking their kids to get books at the library and say, oh, look, there's a map. I can put things on here that I care about. We'll use that information to help us rank areas for their importance. And of course, as we go through this work, some of these landscapes have to be updated because the county's continuing to grow and develop. So anything that either had developed since we began in the fall or maybe has an imminent development plan for, say, April, we went ahead and removed those areas by hand because we don't want to set up false expectations if something's not there. So probably the most interesting part is the first map, which you see in the sort of lime green color. Those are the areas that came out in our mapping as the largest, most intact landscapes. And as part of this work, it's not simply the size of the area, but also if they are providing a diversity of water features that provides lots of opportunities for species. They have diverse soils. They might have rare, threatened, or endangered species. So we've done that work. We haven't done the work to connect them. So we'll be playing a little bit of connect the dots to put in some of the corridors that are good ways to move across landscape. And rivers are a great corridor usually. So we will next look at what we call themed overlay maps. So we can't just throw everything on a map or you won't be able to read it. So I'm going to show you some of those themed maps. And I know I've been talking a bit fast, but I want to make sure I don't go over time. We also will be adding some of these cultural values to our ranking for this map. So some of these areas might become even more important once we rank these landscapes for the cultural importance that some of them also provide. This is an example of our start at the agricultural map, and what you're seeing there in the sort of deep orange color, those are the highest value agricultural soils. And that data comes from the US Department of Agriculture. So those are the soils that are most important for growing crops. And it's important to have this on a map because as we think about areas that might be important for protecting for farming in the future, or if you're deciding to expand an ag forestal district, this lets you know, hey, these are some of the soils that are most significant and most successful for crops. Then we also look at what areas might support forestry because that's an important part of the rural economy too. So here we're looking at areas that are well forested and are greater than 30 acres. Now that doesn't mean that that site is going to be harvested for trees, but it does mean that if it's at least 30 acres, it could be sustained over time. And as we work on this more at refining this map, we'll probably have some large forest areas and smaller forest areas to sort of differentiate areas that might be used for long-term forestry, where you harvest it, trees grow back, you come back in 20, 30 years and harvest it again. And this is just important to understand as we think about the rural economy and whether forestry can continue to be viable as a land use. And then water. It's a very water-rich community, as you all know. We've got lots of rivers and streams and marsh and wetlands. And so what we've done here is we've included things such as the floodplains. We also added in the sort of high event floodplains, like your 500-year floodplains. We show the reservoir in that sort of dark blue color here. But we're looking also in this map at how some of these intact landscapes shown in the sort of bright green also are supporting the health of our water. So they're supporting good water quality, which is important for fisheries, for drinking water, and just for public health. And then if we move on to recreation, that's another theme map we're doing, and it's really hard to see at this scale. So anyone who's interested in getting copies of these maps as PDFs that you can blow up and zoom in on, we're happy to provide that. But we're also looking at where are the trails, where are the parks, where are those recreational amenities? And sometimes there are recreation uses that we don't know about. Like, I'll give you an example that we found in some communities we've worked in. We might find that this road is where everyone loves to go jogging. It's really beautiful and serene, and it's not an official jogging route, but it's a place where a lot of runners go, or a place lots of people like to ride their bike. So that's the kind of information we'll be capturing from the community, favorite places to recreate. And then we'll be using that information. So it might be that the first map I showed you of Habitat Core is also really important for recreation. So we might bump that up a rank and list that as even more important because it's supporting recreational uses. But when you're working on future trails or where future parks should be, this kind of information can inform those decisions. And then heritage and culture. And boy, this is the most complicated and interesting map. At this scale, I'm showing you, it's kind of hard for you to see, but there's actually quite a lot of things on there. And when we finalize this map down the road, we will be turning into icons so that you can see, like, this is a great place for views. And this is a great place for archaeology. I should be careful when I say that. Any sensitive archaeology will be sort of masking the location so that we don't promote any looting. But we're going to use this information to say, okay, this landscape is important ecologically, but it's also perhaps has an old slave cemetery, or it has was a very important place for Native Americans. So we might rank that higher. So it's providing both ecological and cultural value. So that's where we're headed. And the maps that we'll be asking the community to comment on beginning on February 14th will be the maps showing heritage and culture and recreation, because there's a lot that people know and value that isn't necessarily on a map yet. I will also tell you that we're not reinventing the wheel. So for a number of places that you had, there were like community character areas, we have already added those on. So the work that you did in the planning commission is, or excuse me, in the planning process is included, and we'll be adding more stuff. All right, so next steps. What are we doing next? So just to sort of summarize, in January, we've been refining those themed maps. We're getting them now in shape to launch for the online survey. So all the maps that you saw will be online. But it'll be nice when you use your own computer to look at them. You can zoom into very granular detail. You can look at your neighborhood. You can look at a particular road or a park. And then people will be able to drop a pin, a sort of digital pin on the map. And then for those stations at the library and the rec center, we'll have actual sticky dots that people can put on and a comment card so they can write and tell us what that dot means. All right, so we'll be doing the online survey and the maps, and then the comment stations. And then also we are working with our committee as well as staff from James City County to get out some newsletter announcements and various forms of social media to communicate that these maps will be available online. We're going to have this survey available for about 3 weeks. So giving people enough time to promote it. And we've already talked to a number of folks about promoting it through their churches and their community groups. Okay, so longer term, we'll be launching the survey. We'll be gathering all that data from the community, and then we'll be categorizing it. This data about an important view? Was this about a cemetery? Was this about a place to ride a bike, what have you? And then going through a process of updating our maps with that information, and then bring it back to the committee to say, okay, this landscape was important ecologically, but it was also meeting all these values. How should we rank this? Should we bump that up in importance because it's providing both ecological and cultural values? And then we'll be moving into the process to actually put those corridors in so we kind of know what can be connected. We'll look at risk and opportunities in April and May. So that'll be things like, we think this would be a great corridor to connect this landscape, but a future road is planned there. So what should we do? Should we move our corridor to another location? So that's the kind of work we'll be doing. And then hopefully, knock wood, we would be able to have an in-person community meeting. So looking at a possible community workshop, more like a charrette, with a lot of fun opportunities to interact with maps and give comments. And at that point, we'll have specific strategies that we've worked with our committee on to present to the board. So summertime, we return to the Board of Supervisors, and certainly happy to come back and talk with you all as well. And then down the road, hopefully adoption of the plan. So it's not just a mapping exercise, but specific strategies that we'll be recommending. And that concludes my formal presentation for this evening. Our firm is located in Scottsville, Virginia, along the James River, far upstream of you guys. If I got my kayak, I could probably make it down there eventually. But we are a Virginia firm, and the rest of the folks on this list, Matt Lee is our community forester, Stu Shepard is our GIS analyst, and Lauren Duran is our landscape architect, and she also has a background in working on cultural landscapes. So with that, I'll stop the share unless anyone wants to go back to any of the slides. I can always bring that up again, but I'm ready to take any comments or questions, and I've got a notepad here, so love to hear anything you'd like to share with me at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Firehawk. Any questions or comments?
Hi, this is Robert Rose. I have a quick question. The state has been working on their map or assessment of high conservation value landscapes and areas. Does this link to that or use that work as a way to inform some of what you did?
We did look at all of the different state databases that are available. So if they had a piece of a model that we thought that could really inform James City County work, we've already brought that in. One thing to understand is that the state's model, which our work is based on, actually is not as up to date as what we did for you. We've used the most recent satellite imagery. The state model is several years old. You guys have, data that's within 1 year old. And then we also brought in other imagery called LIDAR that is actually showing you the height of vegetation. So what you have is a much more accurate map than what the state is able to produce. And then the other thing I'll say is that it also is going to bring in your values, which aren't in the state model. So we have a great relationship with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We're on a first name basis with those guys. But like I said, the work we've done for you is a bit more up to date than what you'll find in the state lands database.
And just one more question about data. There's another data set that's come out. It was produced by a conservation group called NatureServe, called the Map of Biodiversity Importance. And they're using basically habitat suitability models for endangered and critically endangered species around the U.S. And it might be useful to see how that layer intersects with some of what you've seen for James City County.
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. I have run parallel processes where I've actually built a model and then compared it to the outputs for NatureServe. And I can tell you they were pretty similar. The other thing I'll comment on is I'm not sure if there's a cost to getting that NatureServe layer or not. We did bring in rare, threatened, and endangered species from natural heritage. So we do have the Virginia data in there already. And the model that we built actually does look at that. But I'm happy to check in on that and report back to you, no problem.
You tweaked my interest on the LiDAR data piece because I've been trying to chase that down, and ours is way out of date. So how recent and how granular is your LiDAR data?
Well, we were able to get the, and Ms. Rosario could also comment on this, but we were able to get very recent imagery information. I don't want to get too all wonky on you, but we created a point cloud and we were able to build the LiDAR data from a source that came to the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. And they're going to be working on that and releasing it, but they were willing to give us the raw data ahead of time. So yeah, it is new and it is recent in the last year or so. And we have given that to James City County. So we processed the data and then actually physically gave Ms. Rosario a jump drive so you can put that in your system. So now you do have a very recent up-to-date LiDAR.
When is the KML or shapefiles available for the work?
The shapefiles that we've created will be available. They can be accessed at any time, but we are still making edits. So I guess, if you wanted to look at shapefiles in GIS, we could certainly share that with you. We will have the maps available on February 14th online as PDFs. But if you wanted to talk to the county about actually using a shapefile, I'm sure we could arrange for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry that was so long-winded.
Any other questions, comments? Ms. Feierach, Ms. Rosario, thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it. We look forward to your presentation or your maps on February 14th and to learn more about the risk assessment and opportunities that are upcoming. So again, thanks for taking the time to present that this evening.
Thanks very much. It was our pleasure.
Thanks. Have a great night.
You too. Good night.
Now we're at public hearings for the evening. So our first case tonight is we're going to combine the two public hearings. So we have AFD 21-0003, 360 Racefield Drive, Barn Swamp Withdrawal, and SUP-21-0022, 360 Racefield Drive, Solar Farm. So we're going to have one staff presentation, one public hearing, and then we'll have two separate votes.
3 votes.
I'm sorry?
There'll be 3 votes in the end.
3 votes. Okay, sorry. Thanks. So keep me straight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Mr. Brandon Krajowski has applied on behalf of Hexagon Energy for a special use permit to conduct a solar farm and an AFD withdrawal to request to remove a 26-acre portion of the 65.26-acre parcel from the Barn Swamp AFD. The parcel is located at 360 Racefield Drive. It's currently zoned A1 General Agriculture. It is designated rural lands on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and located outside the primary service area. This parcel is one of 33 parcels within the Barn Swamp AFD, and the total district comes to 2,207 acres. Prior to the approval of a special use permit for a solar farm, the area subject to that SUP is required to be withdrawn from the AFD. Outside of the AFD renewal periods, withdrawals must be approved by the Board of Supervisors according to the policy governing the withdrawals of property from AFDs. The proposed solar farm facility will consist of ground-mounted arrays of solar panels that are mounted on a single-axis tracker. As shown on the master plan, there's a 50-foot vegetative buffer, and then the buffer is increased to the areas nearest to Racefield Drive. The 2045 Comprehensive Plan designates the property as rural lands. The Comprehensive Plan does not specifically identify solar power in the rural lands district. Rural lands uses are intended to help protect and enhance the viability of agricultural and forestal resources, with primary uses being agricultural and forestal activities and related uses. In addition to the land use designation, Racefield Drive is part of the existing local rural road network. The 2045 Comprehensive Plan states that capacity improvements and non-rural land uses should be avoided on rural roads. According to the Virginia Code, Section 15.22232, unless a utility facility is shown on the adopted comprehensive plan or on another master plan for the county, the local planning commission and a governing body shall review the facility to determine whether the location, character, and extent of the project is substantially in accord with the adopted comprehensive plan. The AFD withdrawal was reviewed by staff and found that it only met one of the 4 criteria listed in the board adopted policies governing the withdrawals of properties from AFDs. The 4 criteria are: the request shall be a result of an unforeseeable change in circumstance. Traditionally, that's interpreted to include the death of a property owner. The request needs to serve a public interest. Typically, staff has defined that as schools and fire stations or other public uses. Withdrawals should not result in the disruption of the existing district. Withdrawing this parcel or this portion of the parcel would not have any effect on the overall AFD district. The resulting land use should be in conformance with the comprehensive plan's designation for that parcel. Staff does not find the solar farm consistent with the rural lands designation in the 2045 comprehensive plan. At the AFD Advisory Committee meeting on January 27, 2022, the committee voted 5-0 with 1 member abstaining to recommend denial of the withdrawal request to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Based on any evaluation of criteria listed in the Board of Supervisors policy governing the withdrawal of properties from the AFD, staff recommends the Planning Commission to recommend denial of the AFD withdrawal application to the Board of Supervisors. Staff also recommends the Planning Commission to not find this application consistent with the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and to recommend denial of the proposal to the Board of Supervisors. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval, conditions have been included that are designed to mitigate the potential impacts of the proposal. One note for condition 21, which is the public impacts condition, the condition will be amended to state that the payments would begin once the project is operational. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time, and the applicants are available as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leininger. Any questions? Mr. Alderman?
Congratulations on your promotion, by the way, much deserved. Did you receive any communications from neighboring
No
parcels?
official like correspondence through email or phone calls. However, after the AFD advisory meeting, I did speak with one of the applicants, just kind of bring him up to speed with the project, and he asked a few questions.
Not the applicants, I mean neighboring.
Sorry, I met with a neighbor to the proposed site. Sorry.
And they were neither for nor against it, or?
He was kind of more in just finding out about the project and asking some questions about processing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just as a follow-up, there was a community meeting held by the Hexagon folks. And my understanding from that meeting was that there was nothing that they approved of the buffering of the piece and had no objections to the project. Did I mishear?
I was at the meeting. I was at the meeting. I mean, nobody seemed upset at all about it or just saying it shouldn't be there. That's about it. There was one little thing about runoff across the road at the back corner or something, and that was the only thing that was discussed.
I'm just a little confused. Is the issue right now that the request is being made before the renewal period? And if it was made at the renewal period, can they withdraw it without any questions?
Correct. So the renewal period is later this year. I believe the letters will go out later this spring to all the property owners. We are currently still outside of that renewal period.
Okay.
And to clarify, if it was withdrawn in the renewal, it would still be a question as to whether, well, really the question is the use in the rural lands, correct? As opposed to the AFD withdrawal, it would just be the SUP that we'd be considering.
That's correct. There'd still be an SUP.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Leininger.
Thank you.
This time we will open the public hearing for this application. Yeah, please.
Ready to go? Got it. Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Beth. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brendan Grujeski, and I'm a development manager with Hexagon Energy, LLC. I'm joined here this evening by my colleague, Scott Foster, with the Gentry Locke Law Firm. And we're here to present to you the Racefield Solar Project. We do have a decent amount of topics to cover, and we're going to try and condense everything down and hopefully not take too much of the time that was beyond allotted to us here this evening. So a brief bio about us at Hexagon Energy. We're a private and independently owned Charlottesville-based renewable energy developer. We are focused on working closely with our partners and localities to provide clean energy access to the greater community. And I think you'll see this this evening through the presentation and through the efforts that we've made. We've really tried to take a hyper focus of local community input, particularly for this project. And we're first and foremost a Virginia business. Before I get into the overview of the project, I'd like to speak a little bit on the AFD committee hearing meeting that we had last week. And you know, I think that with the three requests that are here before you this evening, there's some pretty consistent themes that we would like to touch on. But the ones that may not be consistent is, you know, even beyond our requests, we firmly believe that this will be an innocuous neighbor and a positive benefit to James City County and to the constituents of James City County as well. You know, taking a little bit of a closer look, you know, this property will be also a net fiscal benefit, or this project will also be a net fiscal benefit to the project. This property as is gets about $565 a year for tax revenue, and that equates to about the project lifetime equivalent, about $6,751. If this project is approved, that would increase 14.5 times fold to about $126,000. That would be including of the increased property tax rates, in addition to the offer that we have for the ongoing maintenance and beautification of Racefield Drive. So I'd like to circle back to that at the very end. That constitutes kind of talking on the AFD withdrawal request, and now I'll dive into the special use permit request. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the project specifics, why a project of a smaller size has appeared before you this evening, and also the community engagement and progress that we've made since me going before you all, actually most of you, earlier last year. So when we're talking about project specifics, and particularly in regards to the special use permit request, Virginia Code, as Tom had mentioned, tasks the County Planning Commission with making a determination as to whether or not our project is found in substantial accord with the county's adopted comprehensive plan. So what that actually takes the form of in finer points is that the location, character, and extent are consistent with the county's adopted plan. At the highest level, and to frame our discussion this evening, the location is at 360 Racefield Drive in the Stonehouse District, which is Commissioner Knoll's district. It is zoned A1 General Agricultural, and the access will be from Racefield Drive. The character is currently farmed by Mr. Davis. It has corn crop on it, and he intends to plant soybeans and rotate that later on this year. It is a cleared and open field that is actively farmed. The surrounding properties are much of the same. It is a mix of small farmland, rural residences, and wooded property. And then to talk about the extent, we really talk about the size and the project attributes that are associated with it. This is a 3 megawatt solar project measured in alternating current. This is not a large project. It is resting and is proposed on the Kathy Hockaday and Justin and Blair Martin's property that it consists of approximately 65.25 acres. And the maximum project extents that we've been working on this whole time has been up to 26 acres. And so we'll touch on this later. My colleague Scott Foster will dive a little bit further in to talking about the location and character, and I hope that you'll see that solar is truly an anticipated use in the rural lands district of the county's comprehensive plan. Scott.
Good evening, Scott Foster with Gentry Lock. I work in Richmond, but I live in the city of Williamsburg, so it's nice to have a short commute tonight. When staff issued their report, Brendan asked me to take a look at the comprehensive plan and do a comprehensive review for this project's conformity with the plan. We reached a different conclusion as to whether this project is an anticipated use in the rural lands, and this is why. So there are really two categories of anticipated uses in the plan: specific delineated uses, and then a general kind of catch-all category at the end. And I'm going to take you through both. One of the specific recommended uses are certain public or semi-public and institutional uses that require a spacious site and are compatible with the natural and rural surroundings. So this project as a certain public use, that designation is supported by the language in the zoning ordinance, which is this project is considered a utility use as an electrical generation facility. Permitted with the SUP. It's supported by the state code. One of the reasons we're here tonight is the 2232 review, where the project is reviewed for substantial accord. And under that statute, we're deemed a public utility facility. And then again, in the comprehensive plan, this project and this use is really anticipated inside and outside the PSA, and evidence of that is Land Use Goal 1.4, which requires this type of facility, inside or outside the PSA, to be subjected to the review we're here tonight. So for those reasons, we believe that this is a specifically delineated, anticipated use within rural lands. And second, there's this general use at the end of that anticipated use list, or certain uses which require low intensity settings, should be subjected to a case-by-case review, provided such uses are compatible with the natural and rural character of the area and are in accordance with the rural land development standards. So let's talk a little bit about the natural and rural character of the area. So as Brenda's going to detail, this is an extremely low intensity use. Comprehensive buffering and setbacks, once constructed, will generate no noise and very minimal traffic. Does not demand public water or sewer, which are one of the main categories for controlling development inside and outside the PSA, and no impact to cultural, historic, or aesthetic features. And next, the project really is in accord with the rural land development standards. So locating structures outside of sensitive areas. No impact to the RPA, and in fact, given the comprehensive set of conditions associated with the SUP, will likely be a net benefit to adjacent sensitive areas. Maintaining existing topography, tree lines, tree removal is not required, and in fact, with the comprehensive buffering plan, we're going to dramatically increase the vegetation on the parcel. Discouraging development of farmland, there's no question that this project will occupy 26 acres of area that's actively farmed, but we contend that that's a small acreage, and B, relative to the other projects that have been approved, it has significantly less impact to the agricultural lands in James City. Encourage enhanced landscaping, as Brendan's going to detail, through working with staff. We've got a robust landscaping plan. Location of new driveways and service roads. So the existing driveway is going to be relocated. The area where the current driveway is will be part of the buffer, so there will only be one entrance to this facility, just like there is now in its current use. The height of these structures, we're talking about 15 or 16 feet here, so there's nothing towering over the rural aesthetic. And again, with the entryways, the same number of entryways with an improved access route. And then lighting, no lighting at night, so no concern there. And then no threat to existing agricultural structures. And then as to the capability of the existing road structure to support the ongoing traffic demand, Brendan's got a detailed traffic plan that'll take care of that as well.
Scott, I'm going to circle back here and start talking about the project extents and why a smaller size. So this project is really enabled and possible pursuant to a piece of legislation that wasn't even proposed in its bill form in the prior renewal year of the Agricultural Forestal District in 2018. This bill was actually passed in 2020, and it was called the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And what it does is it sets the Commonwealth on a pathway to source 100% of our energy mix through carbon-free sources by 2050. In particular, what it does is it sets annual target goals given to utilities like Dominion, who is the service provider of this county, to procure the power from projects of up to 3 megawatts. And we truly believe that small-scale projects have their large benefits. This is not a 2,000-acre sprawling development that will take up large amounts of agricultural land. This is not even the 200 or 250-acre projects that you guys have experienced in the past. This is 1/10 of the size of that. And we truly believe that it allows us to distribute the investment from solar energy, like in the increased tax assessments, and also the ability to conserve that area for the life of the project throughout the Commonwealth, and involve people that may not normally be able to be involved when talking about projects of this larger size. In addition to that, smaller footprints means smaller impacts, and I'm gonna circle back on this in the next slide. Finally, with small projects come short construction periods. This is not a multi-phase, 1 year long construction period. We're talking about 2 to 3 months, in which case a portion thereof would actually be the height of the traffic where the deliveries would actually occur. So this is really a small period that we would actually be talking about, but it's important, and it's been something that I've been trying to bring up as a piece of discussion when talking about the neighbors and the people that live nearby. So just to reiterate what Scott had said, our small size allows us to locate outside of environmentally sensitive areas. We are not proposing to develop in the RPA areas, and we are not proposing a solar farm that's large enough that would envelop larger wetland areas. Granted that it would be set back, we don't have to worry about that. The height of the structures are going to be limited, and also the driveways are going to be centrally located. So we are not proposing to increase the amount of ingress and egress, and we really do appreciate staff's comments on this particular portion of the project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the progress that we've made since I initially held the development round table review with you all earlier last year. I had personally sent out 2 rounds of letters to those nearby, the first of which was an adjacent property owner outreach. I wanted to introduce the project to them and make them aware of that. This is multiple months before where we are right now. This was in early November. I wanted to get their comments and see the reaction to this. And this was later that month expanded out to a half-mile radius around the site. This was more making them aware of the community meeting that I would like to hold on December 14th, and I was lucky enough to have Commissioner Knoll join me. My messaging to them is that their input on this project mattered. I wanted to make myself available for personal outreach and visits, and I was able to visit a few of them personally and talk about this project. I also wanted their input on the screening plan, whatever the type and the layout and the additions to this project we can make and improve. That has been my intention this whole time. And finally, we wanted to talk about traffic, and I'll talk about in the next few slides that particular facet. So what this amounted to was us being able to make multiple improvements to our plan that we had initially talked about. We'd increased the screening buffer width that Tom had talked about to 75 feet at the first 200 feet of the buffer itself. We had also increased the frontage to be about 100 feet. When I talked with Mr. Beck, who's the eastern abutting neighbor, he did not want trees that would be potentially invasive to go onto his property, and I think that's a brilliant idea, and we're committed to that idea as well. Finally, we also added a northwest corner at the suggestion of Mr. Mills's daughter at the community meeting. That's going to be a 50-foot buffer that would, in addition to screening the projects from all sides, even internally, if you have a vantage that may not be from the roadway or nearby, that would ensure that the project is screened on all sides. And finally, the internal relocation of ingress and egress. So the access to the project itself would be screened entirely, and very much thanks to Tom's comments and inputs on that. So I'm going to speed this along. This image was taken a few months before the community meeting. As you can see, this is Racefield Drive from the east. I'm very sensitive and very aware of the fact that Racefield Drive is a narrow road. It's windy from this distance and also passes through a residential area. I've been talking with the neighbors, and we feel very, very confident in saying this is not the appropriate way to access this project. This is, and so we've liked to commit to that. And in staff's proposed comments, there are two separate traffic plans that I need to have approved by the county in order to be able to have this permit actually go through. And so our initial thought was to have us access from the north in Stewart's Road. We thought from the west would actually include crossing of two wooden bridges, and that wouldn't be appropriate. And again, we have to follow that up with approved plans going forward. So this is our initial proposal, and we can work on that going forward. Finally, this is Racefield Drive from the west, and as you can see, it's much wider than compared to coming from the east. So this is our site plan, and I unfortunately with the time I got to rifle through this, but we had substantially updated this, and I've talked about many of the improvements that we've made. This is our screening plan that more particularly calls out the vegetation. This is the blow up of that vegetation. And these are the screening renderings. And I commissioned personally a screening rendering for Mr. Beck to make sure that he was comfortable with this. And I still do desire to have his input on this screening and to work and improve with him on this facet of the project. This is from Mr. Beck's viewpoint. And finally, talking about project timelines and to wrap things up, we've gone through a lot, and this is by no means a one-stop shop here if we have our permit. I have 11 plans that I need to have approved before we can actually even get site plan approval. And so this is by far not the end of things here. We're estimating to construct in 2023, and I'd like to leave you with the following thoughts. This is a project that we believe to be in substantial accord with James City County's comprehensive plan, and we believe it's been designed with a high level of community input in mind. And finally, and perhaps foremost, this project will create temporary and permanent jobs. It will be a net fiscal benefit to the county, and also the project the property will remain by and large agriculturally farmed through the natural expiration of the date of the AFD, and even though legally it would come out if approved. So by and large, the intention and the result of which is exactly the same. So thank you very much. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have, and I appreciate your time and allowing me to go a couple seconds over. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Alderman?
Do you have a contract with Dominion or another end user?
No, so that is something that we are working toward, and pursuant to state law, we have about 70 business days to execute that contract, and that is ongoing. Yes, and that is precisely one of the reasons why we are doing this. So yes, it is possible that we could, formally submit the withdrawal intentions and come out without having to pay rollback taxes in order to be able to meet those 11 plans. And this is outside of the erosion and sediment control plans and the state requirements that we have to have for solar projects. This is the time that we felt most appropriate that would align everyone's intentions and permit approvals moving forward.
This is Bob, is that why you're requesting the removal now as opposed to waiting until October and it would automatically?
Yes, yeah, we're trying to line up our project schedules and make sure that we can, be able to help the property owner realize the gain from this project.
But one more question. You said James City County would benefit from the electricity generated from this project. How does that, can you very briefly explain how that works? It goes to Dominion, but it's,
Yeah, so the idea is
the
that,
electrons stay in James City County?
Yeah, so the old model of power generation was you have these big gas plants and you have these big natural gas plants. Those would be outputting very, very large amounts of energy. Those would be then fed onto the transmission grid and then stepped down to the substations, like the one that we have. We're about 1.3 miles away from the substation this would be tied into. And that would step it down to the electricity voltage that wouldn't fry us like chickens if we tried to turn on our lights at night. So that's the old and existing way that we deliver, receive power. This bill comes out and that challenges that in that we are able to place smaller resources at much more localized area ways. So it helps with grid resiliency with the upgrades that we could make to the local voltages, in addition to potentially allowing for the idea that you can control via these shutoff mechanisms with the project as it communicates with the grid to allow for more islanding effect. This is a general comment. I make that with a lot of asterisks. This is not going to totally change it, but the intention is that this is a force that will drive that transition to more localized source of clean energy.
And my last question, could you go back to the image of the buffer?
Sure, yeah. Do I right click or I guess?
You don't have to, it's not.
Sure, yeah, I can talk about it.
I think we talked about this, just the ones later on. Anyway, when we talked about this, I think at the Development Review Committee, we had talked about whether it could look less like a planned buffer with shrubs with taller trees behind it, and something a little more natural, and I didn't see that in this diagram.
Sure. Yeah, I actually thought about that, very recently. So, what we've tried to do is disperse out and do the best we can with this plan to make the trees seem less, row, and granted the shrubs need to go in front. I have to be compliant with the county's landscaping ordinance, and so that's what we've been trying to develop this plan to be. We are more than happy to look into further things, and again, this is not the vegetation plan that will be approved. This is a separate condition that we would have to look into, so it's more than possible that we can revise this to make it better.
Out of curiosity, what's 3 megawatts equate to in terms of powering homes?
It's about 200. So, the chances are that the power would be consumed locally. Again, I say that with asterisks. I can't guarantee that every electron is going to go to your house and your house.
Just for a comp. And then how's your tie-in plan work? You're going to go to a substation 1.3 miles away. So are you tying into current lines? Will you be putting new transmission lines? Where's the current?
So no transmission lines. If you see that blue dot, that's where we're connecting onto.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We don't have any speaker cards on this application tonight. Is there anybody wishing to speak? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and turn it over for discussion.
The discussion begins just to sort of help with your thought process a little bit. So we mentioned earlier, so this case is a little bit unique because of the state code requirements. So on this one, there's actually 3 votes. And after consulting with the attorney's office, the order of the vote would be whether or not to remove the property from the AFD. That should be your first vote. Then in your packets, there are 2 resolutions to determine consistency with the adopted comprehensive plan. One resolution is in support. The other resolution is to find it not consistent with the comp plan. The vote on one of those 2 resolutions should be your second vote, and then your third vote will be on the SUP, just to kind of help frame up your order.
I even had my notes right, so.
Excuse me, the SUP for the withdrawal?
Now,
Or
the
the SUP
AFD
for-
withdrawal, consistency, SUP for the solar farm will
Okay,
be
good,
third.
got it.
discussion? Mr. Polster?
You're going to hear this again this evening, but as we struggled through the comprehensive plan and we looked at the survey results, 94% of those folks that were surveyed said that what was important to them was the preservation of the rural character and the environment. And they thought we were doing okay, but we weren't doing enough. And so as we went through the different land use applications and the different chapters, the environment, et cetera, you may recall some of the suggestions I was making to look at these new technologies in terms of ordinances, because we don't have anything, in fact, on the books that stipulates some of the conditions that we see in this proposal for it. But it does recognize the idea that the comp plan itself, in at least two different sections in the environment and the land use, recognize the notion of renewable energies and the different technologies, along with what the applicant has talked about in other sections of it. But getting back to the issue of whether or not we're doing enough, I think this is an opportunity for us to do something different, because one of the things that we talked about was this notion that we have an AFD program that provides a tax deferral, that you heard that we get something like $594 on that the 64 acres a year, substantially less than what the real rate is. But we do that because it is a form of a conservation easement, because that AFD for 5 years keeps it from being developed, whether it's the forestry, the agriculture. So when I suggested these ideas of looking at the renewable energies and how they may benefit the rural landowners, which are land rich but tax poor when it comes down to it, this offers an opportunity for additional income. What's more is this project is projected to be somewhere between 30 and 35 years, which for me is a longer conservation easement to the property than the 5 years and the renewal for it. So getting back to some of the details that were brought up in the withdrawal analysis by the staff is I was here in 2019 when this planning commission approved the recommendation to withdraw and approve the solar farm for the Hill Pleasant Farm. And in fact, so did the AFD Advisory Committee. And what was surprising to me was that, not surprising, but that the Hill Pleasant Farm was both A1 and it was also rural lands. And so we have the same conditions for the Racefield farm here, in that it is agricultural zoned and it is in the comp plan for rural lands. And so if we approved the Hillcrest farm, what reasons do we have not to approve that, or at least disregard this recommendation that the staff's provided? You've already heard when it gets to number B, the request would serve a public purpose as opposed to the proprietary interests of the landowner that would not otherwise be realized upon the expiration of the day. He outlined to you that, in fact, over the 35 years, something like $126,000 in tax revenue relative to that AFD tax, which comes to probably around $16,000. That's a 14-time increase of revenue that is going to end up in the county's stream for it. Part of that is also in the conditions for the SUP is $1,400 for each megawatt. And those dollars are going to the James City Public Works Department for capital operations. So that's $147,000 going to the county to do this kind of work to make sure that things are taken care of. I will say that if you take a look at the conditions of the SUP, when we met with them in the DRC, one of the things that I was very interested in was that the Department of Environmental Quality had put a users group statewide together to talk about what are those sort of conditions that you want to put on a solar farm. And when you look at the conditions, they have met every one of those. They put pollinators in there. They put native plants in there. They put adequate farming. But on top of it, they have agreed to maintain the vegetation throughout the life of the project. One of the other pieces that I suggested that was part of the state's piece was a bonding of the, what's the word, right? When you take it apart, whatever that word is. Pardon? Decommissioning, I'm sorry. And so when you look at the details of the decommissioning condition, it specifies an amount of about $2,000 some odd to make sure that it's done. But it has escalating costs in there over the 35 years so that the dollar amount for that bond will be able to afford that decommissioning and restore the land to its current state. And this land, with the two adjacents running out there, in that natural cultural piece that we were looking at for agricultural lands, is high priority land, agricultural land. It's flat. It is perfect for development. So if you take a look at the one map that started this thing, you'll see Racefield and two other, I mean, this thing will just continue to move in that direction in terms of the monies involved in this thing if we don't look at different alternatives for landowners to do that. You've already heard about the condition that this doesn't really do anything to the Barnesville Swamp District. I mean, that stays in place. And we've already talked about the pieces in the comp plan for it. And so I would just say that because of our previous decisions on the Hill Pleasant Farm for the net positive for the revenue piece, no damage to the district, and the fact that we are leading in that area with the 2045 comp plan to look at ways to make sure that the SEP conditions for solar farms actually preserve the rural and protect the environment for it. I think we're well on our way to doing that. So I think it's consistent with what the intent is of the comp plan of what we want to do for rural lands to stop the development if we can for it. And so for given all of these, I intend to support the withdrawal from the AFD and the other three things we'll have to meet. Thank you.
Other comments?
I'll make a couple. The applicant mentioned that the Commonwealth wants to be completely free of fossil fuels and so forth by 2050. There's an intermediate step there. We want to be renewable electric 30% by 2030. So that's not that far away. That doesn't mean it has to happen in James City County, but it is a statewide goal. I enthusiastically voted to recommend the Rochambeau and the Norge solar farms, both because I think it's a good thing, but also because I thought those properties were doomed as farmland anyway, and they were headed towards a very intensive use, and that this was the solar farms were a much better use for this property. There are a lot of things, Frank mentioned a lot of the benefits of this, some others that he didn't. There'll be no herbicides or pesticides involved here, which is one of the downsides of farming. The traffic management plan, I think, was well done. Erosion management was well done, probably better than farmland would be. Excellent buffering. There's no grading or land disturbance proposed, which means the farmland that's there now will be there again in 35 years. I hadn't thought of it as a conservation easement, as Mr. Polster did, but in a way it certainly is. I have to say editorially, this was an excellent application. I applaud the applicants, the narrative. The letter of January 24th evidences flexibility and a desire to address county concerns. It was really, really well done. Doesn't mean we should approve it, but it was, I just wanted to mention that. My one concern is, can this open the floodgates? If we approve this, we've already approved two others. The two others I do think were different. This one's really out in the rural lands. It's well buffered. The neighbors don't seem to object. But if this gets approved and then half a dozen more come through, what does that do to the character, the rural character of the rural lands? That's my one reservation on this. So.
I'll just add, I agree with everything that's been said. I think maybe a comment about that character of the rural lands. I think to me, it's a bit of a matter of perception. Are we looking backwards at what rural lands was and carry that forward, or do we have a new vision for what rural lands can be? And to me, this is an excellent use of the land, a progressive use of the land, one that benefits not only James City County, but the entire state as we move towards a renewable goal. And it could be a very positive vision of what rural landscapes look like to include solar farms. And I'm on board with that. So to me, if it opens the floodgates a little bit, I'm okay with that.
I'm not okay with it. I don't see what it does to enhance rural lands. We had to go by the comprehensive plan. People want the view sheds. They want the land to stay rural. They don't want development. And then once we approve it, like Mr. Haldeman said, once we approve it, next thing we know, there's another one down the road. Then there's another one down the road. Then there's another one down the road. And then we look like Middlesex County that has, you know, that huge solar farm along the road. And the other two that you're talking about that were approved earlier, they were in the PSA, and they were just garbage land, really way behind developments and so forth. But this is a beautiful area if you drive back in there.
Just to follow on to Jack's comment, for it, one of the things that I tried to press for the comp plan was that we put an ordinance in place that define the sort of conditions that we want these places to be. And so if we think it's something of the future and we don't want it to look like Middlesex County, then it's up to us to make sure that we put the right kind of ordinance together that does not look like Middlesex. And so one of the things that I found about this application was there was an absolute willingness to look at all those different ideas and what the state had proposed. What's more important, a real outreach. I mean, I gave him Mr. Mills' address because he just decided to build a family compound of 6 places that we approved for it. And so I'm thinking, my God, he's going to have this neighbor here, and what's he going to, and he's on board for it, and they've met all the different buffering pieces to it. So I think that this combination of making sure that we have adequate outreach in those areas, plus we have a set of standards and conditions are really required to make sure that if this does occur in different places, we have something like the tourist home B&B that says, here's what we expect. And right now, we don't have anything like that at all. And so we open ourselves up by not having that.
I think I share much of Mr. Haldeman's concerns. I mean, we usually don't lie, but, you know, I do, and I appreciate what Hexagon's trying to accomplish by doing smaller parcels and doing them throughout the area. But I do think this leads to, just given this location and you know, what we're trying to achieve through the comp plan, that this really could create a snowball effect. And, you know, it's got the buffers. It has all the things that we would like to protect. I do question whether or not it actually rises to the level of triggering an early withdrawal from the AFD. So we haven't talked about that at all, but I mean, I'm not sure that the change in law is a significant enough trigger in this event to withdraw it. So I know it seems to be a technical issue, but again, when people bring it forward, we have this, we make an approval on an AFD set on a certain certain set of criteria, and now we're being asked to let somebody out of it early, albeit it's only 5 or 6 months. But again, what does that tell us when the next application comes forward to withdraw because there's some other incentive for development that's not solar panel driven? So not quite sure where I fall on this, but
To that point, the reason that I mentioned the Hill Pleasant Hunt Farm piece is in fact, it was a two-step dance. It was a withdrawal, and then it was the approval of the SUP. And so, and it's in rural lands, okay? So I think we've already made a precedent, and all of us voted on that thing. I mean, I'm sorry, not everybody for it, but we had a majority vote on it.
I didn't vote in favor of it, so.
That's fine, but so did the board. And so they thought, as we thought, that there was a reason to pull it out earlier. And so that's what I stand on that precedent. So I'm back to the pieces. There's a precedent for the withdrawal, not the first time we've done this, okay? But the second thing is, if we do think it's going to be a snowball, then we ought to be back behind the idea of getting an ordinance as soon as we can, so that there's something for us to stand on, which we don't have now.
I have a question that Mr. O'Connor provoked. If we vote to not remove the parcel from the AFD, can we then approve the consistency resolution and the SUP so that once the AFD removal period comes up, they can remove it naturally and then move right into this project?
There's nothing that would prevent a split decision. Like you said, there's an allowed removal that comes up very quickly. So it may, not be logically consistent depending on, the different, decision factors. But there's nothing procedurally incorrect with recommending no withdrawal from the AFD, but still saying we think absent the AFD, this would be a specially permitted use that's, appropriate for this property.
Thank you.
I'll back that up sort of logistically. I think there's a 48-month commencement of construction term proposed in the SUP, and as you mentioned, once we hit October, the property owner would have the by right ability to withdraw that. Doesn't require a vote at the board level. They can just request that it not be part of the renewal, and it's done at that point. It's out.
And if we approve plan consistency resolution and the SUP tonight, they could move forward.
Those would carry forward and ultimately would be resolved by the Board of Supervisors, but, those would carry forward.
I think we got what we need, so. Mr. Polster?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the the Bush Springs, the Racefield Drive Barn Swamp withdrawal be approved, and that we also agree that motion that it is consistent with
It'll be, we're going to do individual
Do one
votes.
separate. Let's do
so-
separate motions.
so
Okay, so I'll make the first
Yeah.
motion that we withdraw from the AFD.
So there's a motion on the floor to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that this property be withdrawn from the AFD. Mr. Haldeman?
No.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll? Mr. Polster?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor?
No.
Motion does not pass.
I'll make a motion that we find the removal consistent with the comp plan.
And so staff has provided two resolutions in your agenda packet. So if I could get you to clarify your motion, that it would be to recommend approval of the resolution to find this
Yes.
application consistent as contained in the resolution in your agenda packets. Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll? Mr. Polster?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Lastly, for the SUP,
Mr. Polster.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the SUP with conditions. I forgot that.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll? Mr. Polster?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Mess up. Oh, okay.
Since the motion failed on the recommendation for withdrawal, I would ask that maybe somebody make a motion to recommend that it not be withdrawn. So it goes up to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this parcel not be removed from the AFD prior to the removal period.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Mr. Holtz.
All right, the motion is not to be approved. Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
No.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
No.
And Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. So our next public hearing tonight is SUP-21-0023, Bush Springs Road Extension of Public Water and Sewer Facilities. Mr. Reisinger, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Mr. J. Epstein has applied for a special use permit to allow for the installation of public water and sewer facilities by extending an existing force main within the Bush Springs Road right-of-way from the Bush Springs Road and Tuano Woods Road intersection heading south. The force main and water main will be further extended within right-of-way proposed to be located on private property owned by the applicant. The existing Bush Springs Road right-of-way is zoned A1 General Agriculture and R1 Limited Residential, and designated low-density residential on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan land use map. Properties for the proposed future right-of-way are zoned R1 Limited Residential and designated low-density residential and rural lands. The application states that the purpose of the extension of the public water and sewer facilities is to serve a proposed residential development south of the existing Bush Springs Road right-of-way, including properties which are outside the primary service area. Land use applications submitted during prior comprehensive plan updates have proposed expanding the primary service area to include those properties, but they have not been approved. The current application is specific to the extension of the public water and sewer facilities. As a result, this SUP cannot include conditions on design aspects of the proposed residential development. The county's utility policy strongly discourages utility extensions outside of the primary service area. Past extensions of public water and sewer facilities outside of the primary service area have predominantly served a significant public purpose, addressed health and safety situations for existing communities, or improved utility service inside the primary service area. The current application is intended to serve additional residential development and is not consistent with these past precedents. Staff finds the proposal to be incompatible with surrounding development and inconsistent with the recommendations of the adopted 2045 Comprehensive Plan. Staff therefore does not recommend that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the SUP to the Board of Supervisors. Should the Planning Commission wish to recommend approval, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time, and the applicant team is also available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reisinger. Any questions?
I have a question. This extension, are there properties along Bush Springs Road that are inside the PSA that would potentially benefit from that? I wasn't clear why it sort of stops at Tawana Woods Road, because it seems like there's even some houses along Bush Springs Road between Tawana Woods Road and the PSA, the edge of the PSA.
Correct. If the extension was approved and installed, then those existing houses would have the option to connect if they would like to. If their existing well or septic systems were to fail, then at that time JCSA would require them to connect as well if they have direct access and are within a certain distance from the lines.
And what is the physical impact of putting this extension in to either the road or the properties that border that road?
You mean
I'm just trying to imagine what sort of the construction impact is of extending this line.
Right. So on one hand, the existing right-of-way is substandard in many areas. It's not of the current standards for width, and the road itself is also narrow. So adding that is sort of an impact. In terms of staff's recommendation, it really goes to the policy document of the comprehensive plan, which does not encourage that extension outside of the primary service area, which is a component of the application. So.
Holster?
Wasn't there a letter in there from the VDOT folks that talked about some of the conditions about that road if the construction took place? And there was an extensive discussion in terms of what it would take. Did I miss that?
So at the time the applicant moves forward with a development plan, they would be required to, for the proposed right-of-way, meet current standards. But given the current application, we couldn't condition them to improve that roadway for the existing right-of-way, if that answers your question.
We have a substandard road that if they put the line in, they're going to have to bring it to standard?
That would be for VDOT to consider at the time of the development application.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Reisinger. Sorry, I failed to ask on our last one, but prior to opening the public hearing, just ask if there's any disclosures. I had a brief conversation with Mr. Getty yesterday.
I had a conversation with Mr. Getty, and on the other one, I had a conversation with Mr. Grzinski. I think I got his name.
I had a conversation with Mr. Getty, and I did tell you I went to the town hall.
Didn't speak with anybody, so.
Thanks very much. So, in that case, I will open the public hearing. And the first speaker card I have tonight is Jay Epstein, but I guess Mr. Getty's doing it. So, good evening, Mr. Getty.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Vernon Getty of 1177 Jamestown Road, and it is a pleasure to be here tonight representing the applicant. It's Marston LLC is the property owner, but you know Jay Epstein and Mike Ware, the owners, and their Healthy Communities company, which is one of the leaders in environmentally friendly and energy efficient building in the state. You're also familiar with this property. It was just before you in the comp plan. A part of the property is within the PSA in yellow, and a portion is not inside the PSA. All of the property, however, is zoned R1, and property can be developed by right. It can be subdivided and developed. Again, some of Jay's images of his Healthy Communities, and well, not directly related to water and sewer, just 1 second to talk about the type of energy efficient homes they build and his goals for carbon reduction. Typical home releases 17,000 pounds of carbon a year. These homes, even without the solar, which hopefully will be back before you for a separate SUP when some laws in Richmond are changed, releases 6,000 pounds of carbon a year. If he can come back with the solar farm, it would be 2,000 pounds. So he's a leader in this, and the benefit of this proposal is if he doesn't have to clear for septic fields and septic systems, you can preserve a significant amount of forest and trees that will further reduce the carbon. And his goal is to create a zero carbon community. He's, of course, applied for the SUP to permit the extension of public water and sewer to serve the entire property. And as I alluded to, absent the SUP, the property is still going to be developed. It'll be developed using individual septic systems, and there would have to be a central well system built by the applicant, then dedicated to the James City Service Authority. And under its R1 zoning, a by right development could have in the 90s in terms of number of units. The applicant's plan is to have 49 units, 49 lots, and you will see on this, the darker green area is the resource protection area. This property is right at the headwaters of Yarmouth Creek, which is in fact on both sides of the property. The lighter green in these areas all around here are additional area that can be preserved and not cleared if you don't have to have the septic systems and fields. If public water and sewer are approved for this site, I understand there are utility policies and regulations that will basically limit the development to 49 lots, and similar to what you saw on that plan. There are no similar constraints with by right development with central well and septic. So the goals of the comprehensive plan in the primary service area that staff bases their representation on are the land use goals of directing development inside the PSA in areas designated for residential development. This property is already zoned. Those goals aren't going to accomplish anything here. The decision on whether or not to grant public water or sewer here is not going to steer growth one way or the other, because this property can be and will be developed under its existing zoning. So you might have the opposite effect of having a more dense development in a by right scenario with central well and septic than you would with public water and sewer. You all have grappled with this in the comprehensive plan. I think the question before you in this special use permit application is a much narrower and different question than you grappled with the request to extend the PSA line and to add land to there. County recognizes even outside the PSA, there are times it is appropriate to extend public utilities. That's why the special use permit process for this is set up. There have been use permits granted over the years in a variety of circumstances, including to serve new developments, governor's land being the primary example, to address environmental issues and to approve the utility system. We submit that this unique property is a case worthy of such an extension. And I think really the relevant issue is the county, is the service authority, and is the environment better off if you develop with public water and sewer or central well and septic? I think there are a number of benefits to the extension of public water and sewer. Jay's energy efficient homes benefit the environment here by saving those trees that I think it was somewhere 12, 14 to 15 acres of additional trees you can save without that clearing. It's good for stormwater, it's good for air quality, it's good for carbon uptake. And that additional acreage can be put into an open space easement and used to create carbon credits. Central well systems are a drain on the service authority. They don't like them. The revenues from the customers don't cover the expenses of operating them. So that's a detriment. Public sewer is better and safer for the environment than individual septic systems. I don't think there's any question about that. Given the location of this property at the headwaters of Yarmouth Creek, one of the sensitive environmental areas in the county, it seems like it's better to not create an environmental problem and have somebody come back 20 years from now seeking a use permit to remedy it when you cannot create it in the first place. And as you all have discussed in questions, future connections will be available for neighbors along Bush Springs Road if they want to, or if their system fails. We think that this proposal with public water and sewer has no impact on the land use goals of the comprehensive plan, but is significantly better at meeting the environmental goals of the comprehensive plan. Staff noted on the first page of their staff report as a favorable factor that in fact this proposal is compatible with surrounding zoning. They also noted a favorable factor promoting public health and safety by providing reliable and efficient water service to the point that it's better than a central well system. So we submit that the benefits listed more than justify the approval of this application and would ask you to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors. And be happy to answer any questions. Also here, William Phelps with Land Tech, the engineer on the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Getty. Questions?
Who pays for this?
Excuse me?
Who pays for this? If it's approved to extend the line, who pays
They
for
do.
that?
Yeah, they do.
I'm sorry, one other, you mentioned the much fewer number of homes, 40, 49. 49. There's nothing in the conditions.
No, my understanding of that is your service authority won't let you have more than 49, can't have 50 homes that would be impacted by a failure unless you have a loop system, and there's nowhere to loop this system.
I did have one more question. You mentioned that approval of this would mean less tree removal for the development of the project.
Right.
And I guess, I don't know how it all works, but whenever I see a development goes in, the first thing to do is just clear out all the trees to make room for the trucks and everything else that goes in. So why doesn't that happen in this case?
Yeah, Ken, I mean, I think the envelope that would be cleared is much smaller if you're not clearing for a primary and secondary septic drain field. But go ahead.
Yeah. Before, back in the summer, if we can go back to the slide with the site itself. Before, let's see here. Okay, let's see here. Keep going back. With the site plan. There it is. Okay, there we go. Well, first, before I start, I want to thank staff. We had an unbelievable opportunity at a roundtable. I was by Zoom, so all the departments were there, and I was able to ask questions and make a statement. I basically talked about when we were here before and your comments and what the benefits needed to show for us to come back for this SUP. And that became the beginning of the conversation. And then I came in and there was talk about, well, we need to reduce the road in the community. We need to reduce the amount of lots. And I said, well, we're saving more trees. And I said, I'm not being a developer looking for high density. I'm looking for a community that I can be proud of. And you can see the theme tonight was all about the environment. And that continues with what we're doing. So when I went through JCSA, and they were right there at their office, so they could pull the numbers. So is the pumps, I said, I want to make sure I cross my T's and dot my I's. Is the pump station sized for our units? They said yes. It says the problem is that you cannot go above 49 units because we're required for it to have a loop system. In other words, they want a secondary connection for the water. And I said, that's not a problem. I said, well, reduce the road too. We're saving more trees. So there's actually, with this design here, it's a much improved design over what I had for by right community. And I have no problems reducing. And I offered to proffer for the 49 lots. I also offered to proffer for utilizing the recirculating pumps for the hot water to save about 8,000 gallons of water. So it looks like we'll have to do that in a different fashion because we have to worry about what happens if I don't build it. It's my dream, but it may not be that dream for somebody else if something happens to me. But this has been my life work, and Mike Ware was telling me that basically we could deed it, that there would be no more than 49 lots out here. We're willing to do a deed restriction for that. But this is a beautiful layout. If you look at these lots, the long, slender ones, they're 2 acres. They're 2-acre lots. The minimum width now for R1 is 100. These are 120 foot wide. There are 5-acre, 8-acre lots out here. There's an abundance of green space just wrapping around. And then we waited on the solar side. That'll come in a separate SUP. I testified back in November with State Corporation Commission because they're deciding on basically the minimum bill. We had a caveat in our bill that we have to pay Dominion. And that right now is with staff at the State Corporation Commission deciding that. So that's why we're waiting now to see what that minimum bill is going to be for the SUP. But it's a beautiful community, and I'm here to answer any other questions.
Sir, so what is the minimum lot size you'd have to have for a septic system? Because I know they don't take up a lot.
It's going to be 100 foot.
100 feet?
Yeah.
But not, because I came from Louisa County.
30,000 square feet.
So that's less than an acre. So
Yeah.
I don't go along with this saving 15 acres of forestry because you're putting in county sewer and water.
Well, but to answer that question, you have, and if you remember, we don't have it in this slide, but in the older slide, you have to have a primary and a secondary.
I understand that because I lived in Louisa
Yeah.
County on 6 acres,
Yeah.
and my septic system took off so little part of my land.
Well, this does, and it's about, because it was 15 acres originally, because we had more lots, this is right around 12 acres, just because of the
Correct.
density dropped. But the key is to build a community that's environmentally sound, that we protect the trees.
I guess my question is just,
Yeah, go ahead.
if we do extend the PSA out there and you're paying for all
know.
of it, then what skin is it off our nose? I mean, really,
Well,
I'm
no,
trying
wait, well,
I'm
we're-
trying to think, why wouldn't we do it?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm just,
I was here before.
that's
I-
coming out of my head.
You know, believe me, it would have been easier the last time around.
Well, I lived in
But go ahead.
Pennsylvania too.
Well, just to be clear, we're not talking about extending PSA.
Yeah, we're not.
talking
This is
about
just for
Yeah.
the water and sewer.
No,
But-
I know.
But the last time around, I agree with you 100%. We were ready to go.
Quick question is, what's the size of the solar farm that you're going to put in here?
It's only on 3 acres. It's 1,100 panels of
3
340.
megawatts, 2 megawatts?
It's less than 1 megawatt.
And that 1 megawatt is intended to power how many homes?
It's going to be 49 homes. We do it a little bit, I've listened to the presentation before, but what happens is we put 18 panels, or 6.1 kW, on each one of our homes at Walnut Farms. You multiply that by 50, and that's going to give you the sizing. Now, the benefit of having the solar farm, in other words, having it off the rooftop, is that we save the trees. The second benefit is those solar panels will be 6 to 8% more efficient because of the air circulation around it.
So are the homes still going to be attached to the grid, or are they going to be fully off the grid?
Oh, they're going to be, no. I wished I could do that, but no. They have the same backbone. They'll be attached to the grid. The difference is with these high-performance homes, you'll have the average utility bill with a standard home is about $225 a month. These high-performance homes that we plan to build, just like we have at Walnut, the average bill is about $95 a month. Then when you add solar in, it goes down into the 20s, where you see in the article $695 during the spring and the fall.
That's a 1 megawatt? Is that what you're saying, the solar farm?
A third of a megawatt.
A third?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
So,
I'm here.
so, I'm sorry to be such a pain. So if we do extend the sewer and water out there, the county's gonna make money off of that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not a negative cash flow for the county at all.
Exactly.
Okay.
A major cash flow.
Major cash flow, which is
Yeah.
what,
I mean, we have.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing is that these lots, as you look at them, you know, it's a better design. You know, if you think about some, because up above, on the top, you know, you have a conservation acreage on that property next door to it. You have that protected.
The county owns it.
Yeah, the county owns it. What's above, so that vista's gonna be there. To the rear, that's a big hunt club that's down there. And then below, there is a farmer down below, you know, and it's just that this is just a pristine piece of property with the Yarmouth Creek. And you think of those large lots and the views, and we're keeping those views. It's going to be a phenomenal neighborhood.
Just to follow on to Barb's comment, is this an age-restricted community?
No,
Okay, so there is going to be a fiscal impact to the county for the 49.
Correct.
Okay, I just, you
Yeah.
said there wasn't going to be.
Because children and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so does,
We were looking at that in terms, I guess, the service authority, that it's better for the
Oh, I
service
understand the service
authority
Yeah.
authority piece, but
mean,
there is
there
going to
will
be
be-
an economic impact on the county.
That
Either
doesn't,
way,
that does impact the extension of the line, because it's
no,
gonna be
no.
built either way.
yeah, I mean,
Right, I'm just trying to clarify that there is going to be an impact.
right.
there will be that impact.
Yeah,
either way.
I just want to make sure
oh,
we're
yeah,
clear
and
about
the
that.
taxes are gonna go, you know, with what we're doing. You've already seen at Walnut Farm, how we've,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to Walnut Farm,
Yeah.
actually.
thank you.
Great,
Okay.
thank you all.
Any other questions? Thank you, gents. Appreciate it. Next speaker card tonight, Mike Ware.
I don't think I have a whole lot to add. Y'all have heard it all. The one thing I will say from the legal standpoint, Vernon and I were talking before, if this is approved and the solar does go through, we can do covenants and deed restrictions. I've already started looking at the amount of documentation to have the solar farm and the HOAs and all that kind of stuff to manage this as a society or a community. But we appreciate your time. I think it's something we're trying to promote. And as you can see, it's going to be a lot of green space and it's going to be built. We're hopeful that we can build it and make it a kind of a last fling for us going out. But thank you very much. He's going to continue. I'm not. I'm not. I'm going out.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. Charles and Lori Walker.
Good evening to the board.
Hey, Mr.
Commissioner.
Walker, if you would, if you just announce your address and I think if you drop your mask a little bit, it'd be a little bit easier to hear too. Thanks.
It's here to hear.
Charles Walker, 261 Bush Spring Road. I'm the one look like a knife.
Where?
The plot that look like a knife, or in the white.
Top in the white,
Yes.
okay. Got it.
I'm originally from Philadelphia. I retired from Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. Right now I work for the contractor for the DOD. And this is country living to me. And what I see, I got animals all in my yard, and I love them. Baby turkeys, rabbits, hawks flying around, skunk now and then. I never seen a raccoon. A raccoon, they come and they can feed that. you know. We do have well and septic. And I'm for progress, but we do construction. I see the other slide they had with the red line coming from Toronto Woods all the way back to Bush, all the way back down there. Then I see the yellow dotted line, which is behind Oakland, another subdivision. To me, I understand laying pipe, the more cuts and turns you do, the more it costs. Straight line is the cheapest way. The straight line is cheap when you lay that in pipe. I see Oakland is closer to that development than way down Toronto Woods coming 5 football fields up to lay a pipe.
And take people land.
And take people land. Then with the rumor around is if your well and septic need upgrading or repair, you can't get it. You gotta automatically go to city water.
It should not be true.
And that what somebody told one of my wife's cousins on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
He can't repair their well and septic. If it go bad, you can't upgrade, you can't repair it, you gotta jump to city water, which will put more tax to the county, I understand that. But it will also put more income coming out people's pocket. Bush Spring Road is a majority African American community, and I see there's a lot of senior citizens that did a lot of work for this county, did a lot of tax paying. And most of them is still alive, thank God.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
And like I said, I'm all for progress, but do it, to me, it feel like they jumped over Oakland, which is the closer way to get that water in back there than going way to Toronto Woods, which is a cheaper way. But to me, they jumped over Oakland because Oakland do got more expensive houses, and the diversity of people is Caucasian, maybe. So they jumped to Bush Spring Road, which is a longer route, straighter for the pipe, which is cheaper. But it's more of a, to me, it's more like just disrespect this side, but respect this side to get this done. And to me, that ain't right. Well, I roll back to Oakland. I got friends live in Oakland. And I see that their woods connect to Oakland way faster than going way up Bushman Road. And I wish them well and everything, but my wife, she's born and raised in James City County. She's born and raised on Bush Spring Road. Her great-great-grandfather used to own the whole road from Toronto Woods all the way back. And Bush Spring Road is a historical community. It's been farmland first and everything, but.
But what I want to say also is the road is so narrow.
Yes.
I'm Lori Walker. The road is so narrow that if you try to pass somebody, you will either run in the ditch or you're running somebody's yard. And 9 out of 10 times, you have to stop for a school bus. You have to stop for the trash truck. And so they take so much on people's yard. Some people, when they open up their front door, they're going to be in the middle of the road because they have no yard. And it's not fair for us taxpayers. So we don't mind them changing, but they need to go to Chickahominy or Oakland or even the new subdivision behind Food Lion. That's the street suggestions I see. And I hope y'all will allow them to go that route and not through Bush Springs Road itself.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it. Thank the board. Thank you.
Next speaker card I have is Alice Wilson. Evening.
My name is Alice Wilson, and I live on Bush Springs Road, 236 Bush Springs Road. But I have a letter that I'm going to read from Miss, let me get her name name straight, Vivian Morgan, who lives at 156 Bush Springs Road. And I just want to say thanks to all our neighbors that came out tonight for this meeting, and some others will speak. The letter was submitted to by Ms. Vivian Morgan, who's a resident of 156 Bush Springs Road. And her words are, "Little did I know that the same issue would arise again for the residents of Bush Springs Road. We as a community opposed this very installation at least 20 years ago, and still do today." Ms. Morgan says, "I am still opposing to install the water and sewer exception because it would not serve me economically as extended as a landowner. I have already invested money to install and maintain my private well and septic system located on the property. Additionally," she says, she is mandated to connect to the system. I would have to pay a substantial high connection fee, and that would require me to pay more of a monthly fee, uses of water and sewer. And she says she's already, why pay for something that she already has? Also, she states, by installing this water and sewer extension, it would encourage the building of additional homes and apartments, especially at the end of Bush Springs Road. This would be a dramatic decision to approve because before widening the road within the current narrow road in and out of Bush Springs Road, and because there are no outlets, the roadway would not be able to handle the additional traffic. Currently, when two cars meet each other, they are barely passing and the others are running off into the ditch. When this issue was before the James City County Commission approximately 20 years ago, James City County offered and agreed to, if there were any connection to the system, if there was any connection to the system, they were not wanted. The residents discussed connecting to or not, it would actually be voluntary. This decision is not mandated, and documents by the James City County sending letters to each of the residents on Bush Springs Road. She also states, and I do have copies of the letter if you'd like to have it, I am hoping that the James City County Planning Commission Committee Development will maintain this and honor the decision of the members of Bush Springs Road. My concern and focus is, I did contact Mr. Glenn with VDOT, and I asked him about the average traffic that comes down Bush Springs Road. He said on a daily basis, the traffic is 420 vehicles a day with the posted 25 miles per hour. He also said that approximately 0.74 miles, and I guess the pavement is 16 inches per width. So I did some research on my own, and when you come down Bush Springs Road, and I'm trying to figure your map, I looked at it today. At the beginning of Bush Springs Road, you have Toanna Woods, and then you have it used to be John Deere, but I think it's the Tractor Supply. That's where the road is actually widening right there. Okay, when it comes down to the Brown's house, down, the road is very, very narrow. You do have to almost get in the ditch, or you have to wait and pause for traffic to pass you. So I know for a fact that the 420 vehicles are not coming down Bush Springs Road. The only thing that we see daily that comes down there is the school buses, the mail carrier, trash pickup, and with the trash pickup, you always have to get over or just stop, and one of us will have to pass. The homeowners, each homeowner probably will have at least 2 vehicles, possibly 3, but 420 vehicles down Bush Springs Road, that is impossible from where we live at. And actually, the road is so narrow, I just can't see the system coming down. And we are actually, requesting that it be moved to another area. Let's see. Again, Mr. Brooks stated that the road is 16 inches to pavement in width. For me, on Bush Springs Road, and majority of us, we do have, let's see, where are my notes at? For me, I have a drain field and I also have a gas line. So if this system comes down, I am right at the end of Bush Springs Road and the development, I guess, will go bypass me. The cost for me would be with my drain system there, my septic, and my gas line, there will be costs, definitely a big cost for me because I have 3 things that's going on right there in that area. Who's going to be responsible for it? That's what I have.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Appreciate it. Next speaker at card, I have Brandon Gregor. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
I'm Brandon Gregor. I live at 155 Bush Springs. For the comments other than.
I don't have any other speaker cards. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Clovis Braxton. I'm 230 Bush Spring Road, Toronto, Virginia. And the septic tank and the water work, I'm talking about, well, I think to me it's a good idea that you could pass it because I heard you talking about the road and everything, but I've been there for 75 years. And in 75 years, the highway is nice to back then. Because you didn't have up a dirt road during that time now. We got a road and everything else, so 49 lots. I mean, you get people out of work and everything else, so I think it'd be a blessing, really. So that's all I have to say.
Well, he was talking about the water coming through Oakland? Yeah, coming through Oakland would be fine, or coming, we would like to have the city water because our pump goes in and out, the well goes off, and it's like you got to pay so much money to get it fixed. Now, when they brought up the subject of us having having regular water, they were saying we had to pay like $8,000 to be hooked on to the line. But like they told you, after you pass Toanna Woods, you come down. Nothing. During the snowstorms, we went 7 days without having our road cleared. And the top of the road was cleared within hours after the storm. We went 7 days, no water, no nothing. And the way that they do it is that they just stop at the top of Toanna Woods. Everybody else, you fetch for yourself. The road do narrow down after you pass Mr. Brown house. You get down the street, you can get a car on the road, but you get a half a car on the road. The other day, I watched them cutting trees down. Cox was out cutting trees down for a cable line. Why can't they cut down trees to make the road bigger? The septic tank in the road too. All of this is connected together. Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other comments tonight? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Janice Jackson, and I'm at 140 Bush Springs Road. About 5 years ago, I just dug a new well, and it cost me $8,500. So with all of this hookup or whatever it's going to cost, I'm not in a predicament to hook up to anything else that's going to cost a whole lot of money when I've just spent almost $9,000 on a well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Getty?
Just wanted to clarify that nobody's going to be required to hook up to this if they don't want to, unless there's a failure. And I mean, the staff might clarify that. That's a service authority.
She can't hear you. Would you repeat that a little louder?
Yes. And I think John said this in his staff report, you're not required to hook up to this if you don't want to.
Give her the caveat.
Yeah, the only
Yes, give her the
circumstance would be
caveat.
is if your system fails completely.
So, just to clarify, currently, if their system fails, they could replace their system. If you put the line in and the system fails or needs repair, they don't have that option anymore. They have to connect to the line.
I'm going to punt that to county staff because that's a county requirement, not anything that
Oh,
developers.
here we go, Max.
Yeah, let's
Hear from the lawyer.
The JCSA regulations would, in broad terms, require hookup once it's available within a certain distance of a property line. There are exceptions when you have a functioning well and septic system, and if there's a failure, you're allowed to make certain repairs as long as they are in sort of the normal course of maintenance and repairs. If it was a wholesale failure of a septic field that needed excavation and things like that, at that point you would be required to hook up to the sewer. And only if a well failed would you be required to hook up to the water.
Just a follow on, Max, isn't that then follows underneath the Virginia Health Department who's requiring that and not the county?
It is a JCSA regulation that mandates the hookup.
Right, but the failure.
Right.
So if the gentleman that has all the land, his well and septic fail, why can't he just put it somewhere else on his land? Does he have to hook up to the?
If there's a certain distance between the structure and the utility, then there's an exception where you can reinstall septic and well because of the length of the service pipe. But if it is in close proximity to the road where the utility would be laid, then you aren't allowed to replace. You can repair but not replace.
So
can I
I
make
don't
a
understand that
suggestion?
either. I had to
Hang on.
move my septic
Ms.
system.
Knoll,
I'm
hang on one second. Let's get through the public hearing first, and then we can come back to have any other questions of staff or the applicant if we need to. So, is there anybody else that wishes to speak on the application? Seeing and hearing. Sir, if you want to speak, please come up to the mic.
My name is Tony Lee. I just got one simple question. What's the cost? He said he pays for all the sewage and drainage line, but if a person's septic system was to fail for whatever reason, what would be the cost to hook up to that? You know, that would be a primary concern for most of the people here because, like I said, everybody's on a fixed income.
So, two things. One, we don't engage in back and forth. And two, I don't think any of us is up here is qualified to answer that question. But I can tell you, we understand the concern of that.
Rephrase the question then. Is it incumbent on the homeowners to pay for their own hookup from the meter to their home?
I don't know, but perhaps after we close the public hearing, we can get input from the staff and try to answer that question in the process. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak?
Rogers from 176 Bush Spring Road. I wanted to know if it's something break on my separate tank, could I repair it?
Mr. Rogers, I'll say again, we don't have the answers to that question, but we will try to have the staff answer whatever they can as we get into deliberations on this. So, but I have no idea as it stands today, but hopefully we can answer some of those questions as we get into the next phase of the discussion.
Thank you.
So, thank you, sir. Okay. last call. I think we got everybody. So, seeing and hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it over to my colleagues for discussion. And if staff has a moment, if they can, so I understand you wouldn't know costs, but Mr. Halavin, I guess if you would come back, we can finish the discussion we were having a little bit earlier, so.
Yep. Hello.
So, Ms. Null, you had questions for
I was
Mr.
I was
Halavin.
questioning the indication that somebody said if the people that live along Bush Spring Road that are not part of this development, if they have well and septic, which they all do, if a part of it fails, they can replace it, they can repair it, right? And the well and repair it. But what if they have enough land to put in another septic field and another well?
Right. So the way that the JCSA regulations are, the way they work is a connection is required. That's sort of the big, if you have access, connection is required. Then there are listed exceptions to that connection requirement. One of them is if you can repair the septic or your well, and the second being if there's a great enough distance between the utility infrastructure and the structure that is being, getting the service, then that is also an exception. So if there's a long distance of service pipe that the homeowner would be required to put in themselves, JCSA recognizes that you've got enough property to put in another well and septic.
So they would be able to do with an exception.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Halavin?
Mine's for the staff on this issue.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
For the staff, I just want to clarify the language, John, that you had inside there, that actually if there was a failure of the system, there was a requirement by the Virginia Health Department that they in fact connect, and it was in addition to the JCSA. Did I misread your report?
I think the Department of Health weighs in as far as when that system fails. It's just in the terms of JCSA regulations that when it does, that connection is required.
We have two things that could factor into whether or not it had to be replaced, something from the JCSA and something from the Health Department.
So I think the Department of Health is the primary agency that would be determining when it fails, right?
Right.
The regulations from JCSA are only saying that when it does, that connection is required.
We really don't know the answer to whether or not it will or will not because of the determination. Okay. Thank you.
And I think we don't know the cost comparison between replacing the septic system and connecting to this line.
Right.
Is that correct? Like we just don't know that.
We don't have those figures tonight. We can certainly help connect people with JCSA to get those most current rates.
And then my question, it goes back to the earlier question that I asked, the impact of development or the addition of this line. One of the community members spoke of the impact that it would reduce their land, that they're opening their door now into the road because they'll have to widen the road. Is that the case here? So I understand that this development's going to happen. It's a by right development. We're not discussing whether that development's going to happen. But with the road development and the extension of this line, is that really eating into the property of the community along Bush Springs Road?
So with the proposed application and the SCP conditions, if it were approved, the applicant would only be authorized to install those lines within the right-of-way along that length. So not within any private property for that stretch. Only goes to private property once it enters the applicant's proposed development property.
Okay. So it would have no impact on the private property of the landowners along Bush Springs Road.
Right.
But there's a setback. Everybody has a setback on their land, a right-of-way. So they could be in the right-of-way. Just part of their land, but it's still a right-of-way. A sewer, a utility right-of-way. We have them everywhere. So, yes, I mean, they could go in, that's where they could put it in, which would take away.
Well, I think to clarify is the road is narrow. I live in Toano Woods, so I'm in that area a lot. I walk your street quite a bit. So the road's narrow, but typically in Virginia or in the county, the VDOT right-of-way is 50 foot. This road is roughly 22 feet, so there is actually, a 20 to 30 foot right-of-way that is more expansive, but it's VDOT's, and it's treed, it's planted, but it is VDOT's right-of-way. So like VDOT, the road comes up into my front yard, so I'm still required to maintain to the street because VDOT's not going to come mow my lawn. But so it's not, if I understand it correctly, it's not a taking of anybody's property. It is just going to be built within the road right-of-way, which may, I don't know, Mr. Epstein, but it may take some trees out and some things like that, but it's not going to be in somebody's yard.
John, I have a follow-on question for you. Does Oakland Point in fact have sewer and water? And is that a viable option, or do you know?
For Oakland Estates, so the single-family subdivision, I believe it does. I'd have to do some research to double-check that. But there are significant resource protection areas that lie in between those, and I think the engineer might be able to better speak to.
That's what I was going to ask, because I know that there is an RPA there, and it is rather steep, but it's not like the JCSA doesn't go across RPAs for it. So yes, I'm very much interested in that point, if you can, not for this, obviously. I'm sorry, I'm looking something from the JCSA is what I'm looking for.
Right.
They're the ones that do this, so yes. I don't have any more.
So the folks that I know that live in Oakland, they're all well and septic. So I don't believe there is public utilities in there, so.
I just want to make sure that we know.
Sure. Understood.
Okay, thank you, John.
I'm sorry, one more question about the impact of the line. I just want to make sure I have it separate in my mind that there might be two issues here. One, there's the development, there's the extension of the line, and potentially separate from that, and I guess that's what I'm asking, is with this development that obviously is going to happen, will Bush Springs Road be changed to accommodate the increase in traffic? I guess maybe that's a better way to ask that question.
So if I could certainly weigh in from staff as well, but I don't believe there's any planned improvements for that existing stretch. The applicant would certainly be required to meet those current standards for what they propose to install in terms of whether or not the applicant is required to improve any of the other length of it. That wouldn't be a matter that the county would weigh in on, at least in terms of this application.
So certainly getting to your point, certainly the impacts from the construction of water and sewer mains, which are going to happen on opposite sides of the road. You don't put a water main in the same open trench that you do a sewer main. So, and those aren't traditionally directionally drilled. I guess anything is possible, but typically you would see that a trench section be dug, like with any construction project and installing major utilities. The trench would be opened up, installation would be done, and then the road would be repaired back to VDOT standards within the existing road right-of-way. But certainly the application before you is only for water and sewer. This isn't a traditional development plan. You're not seeing proffers, you're not seeing a binding master plan, you're not seeing any of that. So really the conditions are limited to what's needed to put in the water and sewer. So because there aren't any proffers, because there is no ability to require improvement of Bush Springs Road. Only do with what's only related to construction of the water and sewer mains.
Can I just ask Mr. Feltz real quick? Do you mind just coming up and talking a little bit about attaching to the sewer and water and what other options may or may not exist?
So the only other viable option that we looked at was actually in Hunter's Creek. But again, the environmental constraints with that in James City County would likely far prohibit that from happening. Again, I don't think there is any public water or sewer in Oakland, but even so, you have the same environmental constraints with that large JCSA conservation property, and as well as the creeks that feed into the Armith, just crossing that. If we had to go through that exercise with the stormwater in James City County, their first question would be why weren't we using the VDOT right away?
That answers my question.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any other questions for staff or discussion?
I'll go first. I mean, in one respect, I understand Mr. Getty's comment about that this is a little different than what we went through in the comp plan. And that difference is that we're not talking about the extension of the PSA, which was one of the issues that was part of it. But I will say that there were several other issues that concerned us when we said no to it. And that was the issue of water and the central well system. And as Mr. Getty pointed out, it's a money loser for the county for it. And if you did do a central well system, the idea that was being proposed was that you collected the $8,000 immediately from all the lots that you were going to build, so that you didn't have to space that over time. And that's one of the factors that makes it a loser for it. There is no doubt in my mind that there are some positive pieces about that water and sewer. But I am reminded by listening to the comments that we heard from the community, the Forest Heights and Grove had sort of the same sort of conditions that we're talking about on Bush Road. And when we did the Stonehouse piece, the traffic going down Croker Road that gets all the way out to where they were going to build is the same width and length. And what was interesting about that, there was nothing you could do about the road. And we heard time and time again about buses, mailboxes being knocked over, not being able to pass at all when the school buses were there. But the other point that I thought was germane to this is the wells and drain fields were in the front yard. There was nowhere that you could get into it on this. And so when we considered this in the in the PCWG for the comp plan, I'm a member of the stormwater group, as you well know, and we were briefed not too long ago about how many sewer and well systems we have in the county. And I think I told you at the time there was 4,800 within the county that we have. What's interesting is we have better than 1,900 within the PSA. And so when I went to look at the location map that the stormwater guys have, it actually located all of the sewer and water pieces that were on Bush Mill Road for it. And what concerned me, on some cases, it looked like it was in the front yard. So when you say you're going to do something about sewer and water, you may end up inadvertently taking out that drain field, and there's no other place to go for it. And then you're caught in this catch-22 is, guess what? We're going to require you to hook up. That's the bad news. The good news is that the Stormwater and the Board of Supervisors for a number of years have had a program to, in fact, hook up people to sewer and water. So it's possible that if people are impacted by this, they, in fact, may be able to get some money to do that. Now, it's based on how far you are from the street and the connection, which is all the things that drive the connection rates from it. But those are things that I know that our JCSA staff could take a look at in our stormwater so that we could at least see exactly which of these properties have drain fields in the front yard that are going to end up being impacted. Now, the other reason I mentioned Forest Heights and the Grove, but Forest Heights itself off of 60, I think you all remember we're going to do the Salvation Army property. We're going to put some affordable housing in there. Is, in fact, the county went into that and it took those dirt roads and it paved them, and it also put sewer and water in that, and there's a JCSA pump station on the back side of that. Now, the roads are still narrow, but at least there was an attempt to address the road condition for it. And I've always thought that that was a rather good thing on the part of the county for it. So I'm very disturbed about the impact that we are going to have on folks that do not have the economic wherewithal to be able to handle it. And that's what we heard this evening. And without some really looking at that problem and identifying what those places are that are going to be impacted, I don't know that I want to stand up here and vote for a program that says, sorry about that, you know, without having the facts or at least being able to have them know what it could be. So a woman comes up here and says, I just spent $9,000 for a new well. I mean, look what she may be facing. So that point really bothers me about this project, and it bothered me when we were looking at it within the comp plan discussions, even though it becomes a winner for the county for the central well, it becomes a loser potentially on the other side. So I'm disturbed about that piece for it. Here we are, 1 year later, and we're looking at the same set of issues. And I don't know what's changed. And to be able to make a decision to say that, given all the benefits that the program has talked about. So Mr. Getty wants to raise his hand and tell us something.
Adding briefly, listening to your comments, Mr. Polster, if you guys don't feel like you have the sufficient information tonight, I mean, the last thing we want to do is, you know, try to ram something through with unintended consequences for folks. You know, we're happy to defer you guys voting tonight if you would like to gather have the information gathered as to what the impacts actually might be and what can be done about it.
I'm reminded of a short story about somebody wanting to remove a fence. And the question was, why do we have that fence to begin with? And the reason that question was asked is because of the unintended consequences of something of that nature that we've put in place. And so I would, in fact, appreciate that kind of a deferral if you're willing to be able to look. I mean, you may come up with some other mitigating ways to help us with this problem.
We would strongly support.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. If you could defer it, what we need are numbers.
Yep.
What would JCSA cost? What would it cost these residents if they had to hook up to it? What damage is going to be done to the road, if any?
Right.
You know, what are the unintended consequences if you dig up one of their drain fields? You know, so I think we need to look into that and have some numbers, because that's something we don't have.
Seems like the missing player here is JCSA, which we need information.
Right. We should know that, because this is going to come up again anyway.
Sure.
I tend to agree with the idea of deferral. In seeing the presentation, and I applaud your effort to build a low-impact community here, and I understand that this community is going to be built one way or the other, no matter how this situation turns out. But I do really appreciate hearing from the community, and I appreciate that you came out and told us your stories, because having that other side of it, to hear the downside of the potential impact of even just adding a sewer line has really given me pause, and I'd like more information before making a decision. I'd like to know what the cost would be eventually if people have to hook up, and if there are programs, what support there could be, so that this line, which seems like a good idea, doesn't negatively impact this community, which people have been there for 75 years, I think one gentleman said. So I would want that information before we make a decision.
Absolutely.
Mr. Getty, I might be just helpful too, just from an illustrative purpose, maybe Mr. Feltz could just put an overlay together that shows where where the houses are, where the property lines are, just so everybody can see the road right of way and understand what, if any, impacts there are.
All the work has to be done within the right of way.
Right.
So I don't think we're going to be digging up anybody's septic fields.
But you also should have, on the county should have where their drain fields are too. That should,
County does have a database of that.
county has that where when you put in a drain field, they don't? Oh.
I think
I'm like,
theoretically,
okay,
the
Louisa
health-
County does.
The
I'm
health
sorry.
department might.
I don't know, I would ask that we talk to the stormwater guys who had that inventory and see what they have.
And then, Mr. Getty, a month, is that how?
How long do you want?
Our stuff pulled together. So that would mean a postponement of this until your next regular meeting on March the 2nd.
So, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we defer till our 2 March Planning Commission meeting, the SUP 210023 Bush Springs Sewer Water Extension.
All right.
Is that a roll call or a voice?
What's that?
Is that a roll call or a voice?
It's roll call.
So,
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor?
aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming out tonight. So what we're doing is deferring this for a month till the March 2nd Planning Commission meeting. So one of the things that they've been asked to do is come back with some additional information to understand the impacts on the folks on Bush Springs Road with diagrams and costs and the like. So, we will have another continued public hearing, but they will also make an additional presentation. So hopefully there'll be some more information for you next month. So thank you for coming out tonight. Right.
Did you all hear that we're going to try to take, when you stood up here to give your addresses this day, we're going to try to be able to forward the information to your addresses so that in fact you get this ahead of time.
Thank God, because I've been just, having lived on well and septic, it's
We're all here for.
All right.
now, Frank, that's what he says.
So, Mr. Epstein, would you mind going out? We still have one more public hearing to go, so if you can carry it to the lobby, that would be great.
Or church people.
I thought they were here for the church too. So Frank, he thought they were here, Frank, he thought they were here for the church too.
All right, our last case tonight is SUP 21-0026, Living Word Church of God. So, Mr. Reisinger, welcome back.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Mr. Darren Curtis of DJG Incorporated has applied on behalf of the Living Word Church of God for a special use permit to allow the operation of a place of public assembly at 259 Ivy Hill Road. The property is zoned A1 General Agriculture, is designated rural lands on a comprehensive plan land use map, and is located outside the primary service area. Originally, a site plan was approved for the church in 1996, and an amendment to the site plan was approved in 2000. Initial construction included a church building currently on the property. However, the associated permits expired prior to completing the work on the interior of the structure and other site improvements. As a result, a new site plan and building permit are required to resume work on the property. Additionally, in 2017, the A1 zoning district was amended to require SUPs for places of public assembly. The existing church building will be rehabilitated prior to occupancy and is planned to have seating for up to 150 people. Site improvements will include 30 parking spaces. Staff finds this proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application to the Board of Supervisors, subject to the proposed conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Any questions of staff? Mr. Haldeman?
The proposal does not include it changing the footprint of the building at all, as I understand it, or the height of the building?
Correct. It would be the existing structure as it is.
And the driveway will remain where it is?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
There's enough room for parking for, I think, 100 property?
Correct. The zoning ordinance requires one space for every 5 seats for places of public assembly. And so that's the 30 minimum spaces required, which are shown on the master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Reisinger. This time I will open the public hearing, and Mr. Darren Curtis.
Chair, Planning Commission, Frank, great to see you.
You're going to make me disclose the fact that I know him. Darren was the chair of the Stormwater Advisory Committee for 2 years.
Oh, okay,
For that, and so I was wondering how well this thing was put together and how it was defined. Now I'm not surprised.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Reisinger introduced me, I appreciate that, and also did a great job summarizing. I don't have a whole lot to say in addition to what he said, because he did a great job summarizing what's happening here. What I will say is that, I mean, obviously there's already a church here. There's a partially built gravel parking lot, which all is contributing runoff, to your watershed, uncontrolled and untreated. So with this, we'll put together a site plan that will have water quality BMPs and detention BMPs to address that. I think really it will have all site elements brought up to code. There's currently a ramp out there that probably needs some handrails, some other safety things that can be improved, and all that will happen with this with development of this site plan. So I see that as a benefit. And with that, I say thank you for the opportunity to speak.
I have a comment on the proposal. I was impressed the way that the parking lot was located relative to the secondary and primary drain fields, and that in fact the locations of your stormwater facilities on that accounted for where that was on that terrain. And that to me was a surprise, because usually you don't see that much a consideration, or they're really close in terms of the way the slope is. So that was a plus for me in your design.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anybody else wish to make a comment on this application tonight? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and turn it over for discussion.
Chairman, I move that we approve the SUP 210026.
Well, there's a motion to approve.
There is. Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Motion
you very
carries.
much. Since you're up there, Planning Director's report, it's all you again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I don't have anything additional to add this evening, other than what's been included in your agenda packets, but should you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them at this time.
Any questions? Hearing none, you're excused.
Thank you.
Thanks. So Planning Commission discussions and requests. We've already covered the natural and cultural assets. Any other comments?
I'll make a comment that the community has left. It's encouraging to see a community come out and speak
Yes.
up for what's important. And to hear that was really important tonight. And I'm glad they came out, and I'm glad we heard from them.
Yeah, you know, it's actually a curious thing because I don't remember what the application was, but I was actually at that meeting 20 years ago when I think the same folks came out and spoke out against, I'm sorry? No, I was at the meeting. I was out there, but I mean, this brought out a group of folks. I'm sure many of them are the same folks. I think it was Miss Jackson. I think she came out and spoke quite forcefully and eloquently, you know, against it. So, you know, so again, to me, it's sort of a double-edged sword because this was something that was put out 20 years ago, and now it's back again. So
But she said, here we are again.
yeah. So, and I don't remember what the application was, but it certainly was the same discussion, and folks didn't want to connect. So anyway. So, any other discussions? So, Mr. Polster has the lovely duty
I
next
do.
week, so congratulations.
Yeah, I get to see the Hazelwood again.
There you go. So,
I wondered who was,
Yeah.
Sue Sadler said, who's talking? I said, it's not me. So that's all I care about.
I could always beg Jack to tell, of course, he will accuse himself because he wasn't there. Okay, I'm
Sure, I
sorry,
couldn't,
Jack.
yeah, I owe you one, I know that.
That's okay.
We
I got
could
this one.
Say Rich has to go because he missed this. He just didn't.
and then just a reminder for folks on policy, we meet next week, so if you have a chance to review applications and forward any questions or scores.
Z-scores.
So, well, Terry asked for your input on Z-scores as well, so. And Mr. Polster said he'd do it all for us
I
if we
will.
wanted
If
him
you
to.
said it to me,
so.
I will. I did it before.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn till our March 2nd meeting.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Good
Thank you.
session.